welcome to the Legal Eagle. Our guest on the show today is someone who's completed nearly 60 years at the bar. He's someone who's been Bombay Bar President 3 consecutive times, very gallant times I must say. He's also someone in a rare honor who's been offered judgeship of the Supreme Court directly. I welcome on the show one of the legends of our times, one of the most brilliant lawyers, Mr. Iqbal Chagla. Your father, Mr. M.C. Chagla, was a well-known jurist. He was the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court from 1948 to 1958. He went on to be an Indian diplomat in United States and in United Kingdom. He came back, was the Education Minister as well as the Minister of External Affairs. He also worked for 7 years with Jinnah. He also was interacting with B.R. Ambedkar. I want you to recount, sir, your childhood years. What were those years like? Any anecdotes from that time that you could share with us? What were Mr. Chagla's thoughts, your father's thoughts on Jinnah, his beliefs, and also one of the common things you both shared, literature?
My earliest recollections of my father were, and I have to say this, that I'm unabashedly his greatest admirer, his votary. And I could never look beyond him. And we had a certain chemistry, he and I, perhaps because I was more inclined to the arts, that we had this peculiar and particular chemistry. But my memories of my father were of someone who went to court every day, naturally, every working day. He would come back from court and if he was not addressing some meeting, and that would invariably be on some aspect of literature or history or the arts, he would be going to the Willingdon Club, playing bridge. He'd come back, have his whiskey soda, and then we'd have dinner together. And I never remember him ever reading any law at all at home. In the morning, he would correct the judgments that he had dictated the day before. But apart from that, it was never any law. And those were my earliest memories of him. Of course, he did talk about his days in his political life when he joined Jinnah. And Jinnah, he always claimed and said that he was perhaps one of the greatest nationalists that lived. Jinnah was so completely nationalist. And if things had been perhaps played a little differently, we might never have had Pakistan. Jinnah would have remained a nationalist. And well, that's how he always told the story. And of course, his break came with Jinnah when Jinnah began his two-nation theory and he left him. And then after that, of course, my father in 1941 became a judge, and that was goodbye to politics and hello, judiciary. So those were my recollections of literature, where Chief Justice House is a beautiful house with a large garden, both on the front side, the back side, and there is a first floor, which I had entirely to myself. For a while, my sister was there, and she got married. And there were just 2 bedrooms there and a large sitting room where there were a host of my father's library, his entire books, on literature. And I had full freedom to look into the literature.
So 2 questions here. Did you always want to do law? How were your school years like? How was your college years like, sir?
Let me take my school years first. The most democratic school that you could possibly have. Nobody really cared a damn who your father was, how rich he was, what position he occupied. You had to speak for yourself. And nobody really cared. And of course, again, what you've commented, to arrive at St. Mary's in a car was the worst possible thing that anybody could ever do. It was frowned upon. Nobody really liked it. And so we used the school bus. In fact, I always used the school bus, even before St. Mary's, even going to the nursery school, St. Teresa. My parents sent me by bus. Using a car and going by car in those days was considered completely beyond the pale. Nobody ever did that. So those were my years in St. Mary's. There were 9 wonderful years. And I have to say that in a sense, I still am introverted. So my early years at Chief Justice House, surrounded by books, were a sign of my being introverted. In school, equally, but it was only in the later years that I began to socialize more, get to know people more, and interact with them. And my best memory of St. Mary's, apart from the close friends that I made, was of Dom Moraes, who later won the Hawthornden Prize at the early age of 20 or 19, the first Asian ever to do it, and it had not been awarded for 20 years. He was a great, great poet, a great writer, both prose and poetry. And we had some lovely, memorable days together at that time. I went to St. Xavier's College, where I spent 2 years, and after which I went to Cambridge, as you said, at a rather early age of 18. Perhaps I should have gone a little older, but I think by 18 I was already becoming a little mature. I remember I did History Part 1 at Cambridge, Law Part 2, and I found that there was a stack of lectures which were all part of my curriculum. So I went to my senior tutor and I asked him, I said, look, how do I go about this? I mean, how many lectures am I expected to attend? I was coming straight from St. Xavier's, where you were expected to attend every lecture. You were marked your attendance, yes, present, absent, whatever. And he said, well, a very difficult question. I can only answer it by giving you my own experience. But speaking for myself, I should have thought 1 a week was more than sufficient. And I was quite astounded to hear this. But my senior tutor went on to say that, look, my advice to you is that in the first week and 10 days, attend as many lectures as you can. And then you decide what lectures you like. And I said, if I don't like any lectures, he said, then please, for God's sake, don't attend them. So here I was at the age of 18, being asked to sit in judgment on the professors and the lecturers to decide what lectures I like. And if I didn't like any, well, I wouldn't attend those. Did I always intend to do law? No, I did not. I had ideas of doing journalism, of writing, all of that. But I thought I must have some professional degrees. And so I did do law, more as a sort of fallback position. And that's why I did History Part 1 and Law Part 2. And then I did the bar finals in London. And well, then I decided that a job was not for me. I could not ever think of serving somebody. So there I was into the law. My father advised me, he was in Bombay at the time, and he advised me that to go and see Sir Jamsetji Kanga, the doyen of the Bombay Bar. And I went to see Sir Jamsetji, and he said, look, I am now retired, but my advice to you was, why don't you join Baba? And that's where began the great relationship that I had with Kharshedji Baba.
You were saying you joined the chambers of Kharshedji Baba. I wanted to ask you how that experience was like. Who were your contemporaries? I heard there was an occupational hazard there. Everyone invariably was offered to be a judge. How did you all sit there? And how was Baba as a senior himself like?
This was chamber number 1 in the Bombay High Court. The space in Bombay is extremely limited. Real estate is very limited. So here these were these chambers where Baba had a whole host of juniors, and his chambers were done in such a way that there was one table occupied by Fali Nariman, his first junior, and the rest were all in cubby holes with a chair, a reclining chair, one of those Godrej reclining chairs, with a couple of chairs on the side. So that you did your work in that cubby hole. You had conferences there with the person sitting on either side, or you went up to the High Court library. And it was an amazing experience, and how I still remember even when I went to a larger table outside chamber number one in the main, I remember an American lawyer once asking me that, how do you work in this organized confusion? Because there were conferences being held all around me. We were just about being audible, hearing each other. But that's how we worked. And my contemporaries at the time in Bhaba's chambers, Fari Nariman himself, Soli Sorabji, Obaid Chinoy, Jangu Khambata, who was doing very well at the bar but decided to leave and became later managing director of Glaxo, and a host of others.
How was Baba himself like?
Oh, he was I've never known anybody with a greater work ethic than him. And he expected his juniors to do the same. He was a hard taskmaster. And I think that was an excellent thing that we had to go through to learn at his feet. And the one thing that I learned from him was this, that one is never absolutely clear and satisfied in any matter. No amount of research is ever complete. There is always time to do more. There's always a desire to do more. And you're always that feeling that I'm still not quite ready with this matter, even as you're walking into court. And I carry it even till today. When I walk into court, I am never satisfied that I've done enough work on it. And I think that was the greatest. And he was an excellent senior. He could be very difficult, but he'd bring you up in the morning before court and say that, just look up these authorities, and they give you about a dozen authorities. And those were the days when you didn't have Xerox copies. You rushed to the High Court library, pulled out all those books, went through them, and he'd saunter up to the library and ask. And you tell him that, well, the majority of them were quite irrelevant. There might have been one or two which some semblance of, but that was his style of functioning.
What is the ethics that you practice in your chambers, and what would you say about the ethics of the Bombay bar as a whole?
What perhaps I tried to pass on to them was this belief that at the end of the day, we are lawyers first, and officers of the court first, and then lawyers of a particular client. And as officers of the court, we owe that greater duty to the court than we owe to our own client. And that is something that we should never forget as professionals. And I think in the Bombay High Court, that is treated very, very respectfully. And I think also the judges, they will take the word of a lawyer, of a counsel, a senior counsel, or for that matter, even of a junior counsel, practicing on the original side, and accept that word. And it's only when somebody gets a little too sharp, a little too clever, that judges begin to then doubt his sagacity, his wisdom, and his work ethic, and whether they should believe him or not. So I think that's the great takeaway of the Bombay Bar.
In 1990, led by you, the Bombay Bar moved a resolution against 5 judges on corruption charges and asking them to be stepping down. In 1995, a similar resolution moved against the sitting Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court. These were extremely unprecedented. This was requiring a lot of gumption and tenacity. My only question here, because when I read about this, when I saw this, it gave me goosebumps. What gave you the tenacity at that time to lead the Bombay Bar to pass such resolutions, sir?
It was in 1990 when things came to a head, and there were instances, and this was our collective experience, of some 5 judges who we believed were not exactly honest. And that's the time when a lot of people talked to me about this, and we discussed what we should do. And that's when I said that, look, things have come to such a head that something has to be done. As I've said before, that my only thing was that when posterity asks that question, that when your judiciary was going down, Did you just sit back and earn your fees and do nothing at all? And what would my answer be then? And I have to say this also, that it was my good fortune that we had as a Chief Justice of our High Court, Justice Chitatosh Mukherjee, and in the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of India, Justice Sabyasachi Mukherjee. I think without them, I would have definitely gone behind bars. My colleagues told me that, look, we realize that what you are proposing is clear contempt, and justification is not an answer. It wasn't at that time. And so you couldn't plead justification in answer to contempt. So it was clear contempt. And, well, we went and saw Chief Justice Mukherjee, our Chief Justice, and he said that, look, give me a week's time. At that time, the problem was related only to a particular judge. And after a week, he said that, look, I've not been able to do anything. I can't give you my blessings, but I'm not going to stop. And that was enough of a signal. And so we went ahead and we passed those resolutions. And it was later that when I became president of the Bar Association, I was in Delhi for a case in the Supreme Court, and I called upon the Chief Justice of India, and he said, come to my residence at 4:30 in the evening. And I went. And, well, I was sitting there and he came in, very grim-faced, and Mr. Chagla, as the Chief Justice, we shook hands. I have a question first. Do you intend to do this again? I said, good Lord, Chief Justice, certainly not. This was a one-time exercise, and it's taken enough out of me anyway. He said, oh, then may I congratulate you. This was something that needed to be done. We did our own investigation, and we found they were all guilty as charged, and we were delighted, but also worried that there may be a domino effect. You know that the Bombay Bar is a very responsible bar, but other bars are not so responsible, and that this might have a domino effect and resolutions being passed all over India about all sorts of judges. And when that didn't happen, quite frankly, we were delighted. And this was the Chief Justice of India disclosing this to me quite candidly. He was a remarkable Chief Justice, and his early death was a great blow. And, well, who would have believed it that 5 years later, history would repeat itself? You know, we had a bent Chief Justice, proven to be so, $84,000 of a royalty being paid for a book by a publisher which was non-existent. The publishing house, we made inquiries in London that the address that was given, there was no publishing house. It was a block of residential flats. And, well, the whole thing was pretty bad. And I in fact, went and saw the Chief Justice and asked him that, you know, once the resolutions were being moved, he called me to his residence, and I said, look, I'm not keen on passing such resolutions or moving them. What would you suggest, Mr. Chagla? I said, well, if you give me your word that you will resign, then I will see that the resolution is not passed and we defer it. And, you know, and before that, I got a call from the Supreme Court by a senior judge in the Supreme Court. And he told me, he said, look, we are looking into the matter, so please don't do anything. So I said, well, I'm happy to hear that you're looking into the matter. In that case, I will tell my members and we will defer the resolution. He said, no, this is only for your ears. This is not meant to be told by you to the members of your association. So in which case I said, Judge, I'm very sorry. If I'm being told something, I can't just tell my members that we are not passing the resolution, we're not moving it, we're deferring it, unless you allow me to tell them, I'm sorry, then otherwise we have to go ahead with it. So he was not very happy, but there it was. And so the Chief Justice said, give me a week's time. I said, there's no problem. We adjourned the meeting for a week. I told my members that this is the assurance that the Chief Justice has given me. We waited for a week. Nothing happened. I repeatedly went to his chambers, asked his secretary, is there any word for me from the Learned Chief Justice? Answer was no. A week later, then we went ahead and we moved the resolution and it was passed. So that was that. The sequel, of course, is this, that somebody filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court. I think it was more an engineered one. The idea was to bring to task the Bombay Bar Association and the president in particular. And I had to file an affidavit in that matter, which I did, but I did not disclose this conversation with the Chief Justice, with the sitting judge of the Supreme Court. But I did tell Khalid Nariman, who I had requested that please appear on behalf of the Bar Association and myself, I told him that this is what had happened, and I'm not stating it in the affidavit because it was said to me in confidence. And the judge who heard the matter, he asked Nariman, he said, Mr. Nariman, was the president of your association not told that the Supreme Court was looking into it? And Fali said, I'm glad your lordship asked that question. Yes, but he was told that in absolute confidence, and that's why he's not disclosed it. But now that you asked the question, yes, he was, and he wanted it to be shared with his members of his association, which was not done. And as a result, the resolutions went forward.
You were offered to be a judge in a rare honor directly to the Supreme Court by the then Chief Justice, Justice J.S. Verma. You had also been offered to be a judge twice before by the Bombay High Court. You and your ideas would have benefited India with your ideals. Why had you refused, especially since you would have been Chief Justice of India for more than a year, sir?
Well, the earlier occasions when I was asked, there were a number of problems. At that time, there was the transfer policy, which of course was during the time of Indira Gandhi. And then after the Janta, I said to the Chief Justice who had offered a judgeship to me that I said, I'm sorry, I don't trust this government very much more than the last, and I would rather wait and see the track record of this government. So that time I had said no, and also there were certain financial reasons why I could not accept a judgeship. The offer to sit in the Supreme Court, to say no to that was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my life. But it a lot of cogitation, a lot of thought, but there were various personal reasons which then dictated that I could not say yes. I know Justice Verma was most displeased. Justice Kuldeep Singh was even more displeased. I got repeated phone calls, persuasion. But at the end of the day, I was saying no to 13 months of being Chief Justice of India. In a sense, I think if the tenure had been longer, then perhaps I would have overridden all personal considerations and said yes. But 13 months was 13 months. And I think in today's context, it's considered to be quite a handsome period. I did not believe so. But anyway, it was a very personal decision I had to take, a difficult one, but I took it nevertheless.